right. Welcome everyone to our information session with the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, or OCC for short. I'm Emily Johnson. I'm a career counselor in the Career Center with Metro State. Before we get started, I'd like to share with everyone that today's info session will be recorded. You'll only be shown in today's recording if you speak with your camera on, but we encourage you to keep your camera on so we can engage with our presenters. Our session does include automated closed captioning. So if you'd like to use this feature during your session, please look at the live transcript button at the bottom of your toolbar. And without further ado, we are so happy to have our friends from the OCC here to host our information session. Jay Branger is here today to help us learn more about what is the OCC, why we want to work there, and how we can be successful in our job search. And Jay has also invited his colleague and a Metro State alumni to join us, Marcy Hepner, and we are excited to learn from each of you. As we learn from our presenters, you start thinking about what questions you have, and you can put them in the chat. Our presenters have said they would love to answer them as they come in. So as you think of something, pop it in the chat, and I will pass it off to you, Jay.
Great, thanks, Emily. So welcome everybody. I hope that everybody is having a good day. I was telling Emily previously where I am, it's storming right now. And so if you hear a clap of thunder, that is why. It's raining and the wind is blowing. So like Emily said, my name is Jay Branger and I work with the OCC, and I work in the Minneapolis field office, which is right in downtown Minneapolis. And I work as an assistant deputy comptroller, which is just a fancy name for a manager. And in our office, I have two peers that are also managers like myself, and we supervise roughly 70 commercial community banks and thrifts, and we supervise about 50 people right now. And I've been working with the federal government nearly 36 years and have been in the regulatory field for that entire time frame. So welcome everybody, and I'm going to have Marcy introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Jay. My name is Marcy Hepner, and I am an examiner in charge of a large bank supervision. And so Jay is going to get into it, but in the OCC, we have different lines of business and departments. So Jay is a manager in the community bank arena, and I'm a manager in the large bank arena. And I have been with the OCC for 22 years. And I was telling Emily that Jay taught me everything that I know about ag lending and a variety of other things as well. So Jay was one of the people that taught me about bank examination when I first started with the agency.
So what we're going to do this afternoon is just to share with you a little bit about who the OCC is, you know, what the types of people that we recruit and hire with our organization, and just kind of what the career path is within the OCC as well. And then certainly answer any questions you have along the way. You know, and then Marcy is at the end of the presentation. She's going to just talk a little bit about her career path and being an alum of Metro State, you know, just kind of how her career, about her career and how she's advanced, and you know what Metro State meant to her as well. So we're going to start out and just talk a little bit about who the OCC is. And so we're an independent bureau of the U.S. Treasury Department, and we were actually formed during President Lincoln's tenure as president back in 1863. And we're headed by the Comptroller of the Currency. And that individual is appointed by the President of the United States, and they serve a 5-year term. Currently, we have an acting comptroller, Comptroller Sue, but I would assume in sometime in the future, President Biden will appoint a full-time comptroller to lead the agency. And we employ approximately 3,500 people. Our headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and a number of our staff members are housed in Washington, D.C. But we also have employees located throughout the country, working in our large bank line of business. As Marcy said, she works working in community and mid-sized lines of business scattered throughout the country. And we'll talk a little bit about more where those locations are. And really, our mission is to ensure the safety and soundness of the federal banking system, and as well as promoting fairness and equal access for people to bank services. So what we do, the OCC examines national banks and national thrift organizations to ensure they operate in a safe and sound manner, they comply with financial laws and regulations, and provide equal access and fair treatment to customers. And so maybe just some examples of who we examine. So in my line of business, I'm in the community bank line of business. And so in the local marketplace, maybe some community banks you'd be aware of and familiar with. One might be Bremer Bank, which is headquartered in St. Paul. Another bank in my portfolio is Sunrise Banks, which is also in St. Paul. So those would be examples of community banks right in the metro market. In our mid-sized line, that would include banks like Associated Bank. Old National Bank is in the Twin City metro market. And for many years, Twin City TCF Bank was a mid-sized bank until they merged with Huntington Bank, and then they merged into the large bank program. And then large banks in the area that you might be familiar with are US Bank, for example, and Wells Fargo Bank. So that's just kind of the three lines of business and some examples that we supervise. Our core values that we operate under and abide by, certainly integrity is utmost and foremost. We do the right thing. We're acting in accordance with laws and applicable policies and regulations. And we really conduct our work in the highest ethical standards that we can pursue. Expertise, we have a highly skilled workforce. And that's one of the things I really enjoy working with the OCC is that we have a highly trained workforce. Each of our employees brings a unique skill set to the table. And when you work for us, there's just a multitude of training opportunities that we all receive on an annual and ongoing basis. And really the key thing there is that as the banking industry changes, as examiners, we need to continue to develop our expertise to be able to supervise those banks. And so a real highly skilled workforce that we work with. Collaboration is key. We work in a team environment, team setting. And so our ability to collaborate with one another is certainly very important to our work. And then the last thing is independence. And so we're an independent agency. We work with the freedom of undue influence or control of others. And when we examine our banks, we're kind of like umpires in a baseball game. We make the call. And as part of that call, we evaluate the condition of the bank. We evaluate their compliance with laws and regulations. And we evaluate their actions to serve the public in a fair and just manner. The OCC, we regulate and supervise nearly 1,200 national banks and federal savings associations. And maybe just a little backdrop on the US banking system. And I'm sure that, as you studied in some of your courses at Metro State, it's a dual banking system. We supervise national banks and thrifts. And we're the sole regulator for the national banking and thrift community. On the state banking side, those organizations are supervised by their state, usually by their state agencies that are governed by the state. And then they're also supervised by either the Federal Reserve Bank or the FDIC. And so state banks and thrifts would have two regulators as opposed to national banks and federal savings associations that would just have the OCC. So what we do is, we do a number of things. both Marcy and I work more on the examination side of the business. And so we're examining our banks to determine to make sure they're in a safe and sound condition and following applicable laws and regulations. We also have a licensing division that considers applications and other corporate approvals that are necessary. We have an enforcement division that certainly would take supervisory and enforcement actions against banks that do not comply with laws and regulations or otherwise engage in unsafe and unsound practices. And then we regulate, and we certainly issue rules and regulations, legal interpretations, guidance, and that sort of thing for the banking industry to follow. And as we regulate, we collaborate with the other regulatory bodies as part of that process as well. Working with the FDIC and the Federal Reserve Bank to issue interagency guidance for our banks to follow. So when we examine a bank, we look at a variety of areas, and you can see on the screen here the number of items that we look at during an ongoing examination. And you may hear the acronym, the CAMELS factors for the bank, which is capital adequacy, asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity to market risk. And then we also, evaluate the bank's information technology function. If they have trust powers, we would look at, the fiduciary activities they're involved in. And then we also evaluate consumer compliance. And then on a 3 to 5 year basis, look at the bank's performance under the Community Reinvestment Act. And that really looks at mainly at the bank's, lending to low and moderate income people in serving those communities. And so in all of these factors that are listed here, we would assign a rating to each of those areas, and then also assign a composite rating for the bank. And the rating system runs from a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the highest rating and 5 being the lowest. And so again, each of these components are rated individually, and then we would aggregate that score up, if you will, to an overall composite rating for the bank. So let's talk next about just a little bit about a bank examiner career. And so when we hire people to work for our organization, the first 6 to 12 months, they would work as part of a training team environment. And, and as I kind of mentioned up front, we work with a very highly skilled workforce, but to become highly skilled, there's a lot of training involved to achieve those skills. And so from the onset, we're taking entry-level hires, and giving them the tools that they need the basic tools that they need to develop to be able to examine our banks and our organizations. And this lays out, just a little bit about the community mid-size community bank line of business. Banks in that environment, assets up to $50 billion in total assets. We've got field office on the community bank side scattered across the country. And in a training team environment, you'd work for this first 6 to 12 months in a training team, and that would be led by one of our more experienced staff members in the field office. You travel to multiple banks aside in your local field office, and then you'd work in a myriad of banks of different complexities and varied products and diverse customers. And so this slide speaks a little bit to just how the community bank line of business is organized. We currently operate under a framework where we have 4 districts. The Minneapolis field office is part of the Central District, and that's headquartered in Chicago. And then we have a Western District headquartered in Denver, a Southern District headquartered in Dallas, and a Northeast District headquartered in New York City. And like I said earlier, our main headquarters is in Washington, D.C. And This slide here is it's going to become dated in the next few months as we're doing some realignment within the district lines and that sort of thing. But we'll continue to have field offices located throughout the country that'll supervise the community bank line of business throughout the country. From a career progression standpoint, an entry-level hire would begin operations with us as an assistant national bank examiner. They would remain in that capacity for their first year. Upon successful completion, they would then be promoted to an associate national bank examiner. And during the next 3 to 4 years, they would work and study to be prepared to take a uniform commission examination test. And once successful completion of that is achieved, they would then become a national bank examiner. And typically, that occurs around year 5 when people would take that commissioning test and receive their national bank examiner status. And with that national bank examiner status, they're able to sign reports of examination, lead examinations, and really it's at that stage of a person's career, that a lot of doors begin to open for you because you can start to specialize in different specialty areas, do work in mid-size and large banks more predominantly, and really start to develop your own individual skill sets. Just with regard to what are some perks in working for the OCC, starting salaries are $54,000 a year. That being said, we also pay a geographic differential based upon the cost structure of the cities where the field offices are located. So for example, in Minneapolis, examiners in Minneapolis receive an additional 10.29% on top of that 54,000 due to the cost of living in the Minneapolis area. And as you travel to both the East and West Coasts, those geographic pay differentials increase substantially due to their higher standard of living. But it's a way to be fair and to balance out the higher cost of living at different places throughout the country. We also have other excellent benefits, certainly have paid vacation and sick leave. We receive national holidays off. We work a flexible schedule. And most staff members work a schedule where we are able to achieve our 80 hours in 9 days. And so our 10th day, which is typically a Friday, would be a flex day. So we would have that 10th day off. So that compressed schedule is well received by employees in the organization. Certainly there's opportunities to work nationwide in other locations, and people are eligible to apply for those jobs. Like I said up front, just a real high quality training and development opportunities. If people want to, for example, achieve their CPA designation, the agency will pay for the cost of that. Same for other designations like a CFA designation or fraud designation and those sorts of things. Very generous retirement program and employee matching in both a 401k and a thrift savings account. And then our health coverage and dental and vision coverage is excellent. Often when we go for dental or vision needs, the vendors will say that we probably have the best coverage they've ever seen. So just a very strong benefit package, and I think a very competitive salary to what's in today's environment. This just shows that within the federal government, we're ranked very highly. Out of 411 federal agencies, we're in the top 100. We're in the 87th out of 411. And you can see the various areas where we fell out in the top 100. So a very employee-friendly place to work, very good place just from a work-life balance perspective, and very family friendly as well. So certainly employees appreciate that part of the job. And just a few things about what employees are saying, certainly on our work, and I guess I can speak to this comment that's on the screen as well. You know, one of the things I enjoy about working with the OCC is every bank we examine is different, and every bank has their own business model. They have their own, objectives for serving low and moderate income people, for example. And you can have two banks that are located right next to one another, and they may operate very differently. And that's what keeps the job interesting and keeps it very fresh. And, and as I said earlier, I think as the banking industry has become more complex, it also offers an opportunity just for a lot of growth and development for all of our staff members. And then the second thing is just from a cultural perspective, a very comfortable working environment. We have a number of affinity groups that are part of our organization. As I said, very family friendly, and I think very employee friendly as well. So I think both from a work perspective and just a cultural perspective, just a real high quality organization to work for. So how can you qualify to work for the OCC? First of all, from an educational perspective, bachelor's degrees in accounting, business, commercial or banking law, economics, finance, marketing, other closely related fields are certainly all fields of study that would qualify for a person to apply for one of our jobs. We also hire people with industry experience. And so you can see the various industry experiences that would be acceptable as well if people work in the industry for 3 years. And again, in these various areas, they would be eligible to apply for a position as well. And as part of the application process, there's certainly you would apply on USA Jobs. It's an online application engine. And to qualify for an interview, you would have to successfully pass an entry-level pre-employment test. And then there would be 2 structured interviews that staff members would go through. And the vacancy announcement would outline all of those processes and requirements. And this just shows, the next slide just kind of shows the progression of timeline, if you will, as far as when you submit your application and how it all works through the process. And so what's shown here is a spring hiring event where students would submit their application in late January, early February. They would take the pre-employment assessment or the test that I spoke of. They would have a screening interview probably in mid-March. They would have a decision interview in early April. And then by the end of April, those offers would be extended. And then their start date would likely be in early to mid-June. And we also hire people in the fall that would start in the June timeframe as well. So in that situation, let's say people would submit their application likely between mid-September to the latter part of October. They would take the pre-employment assessment. Screening interviews would probably happen in early November. And by the end of November, there would be a decision interview. The offer would be made by year end. And then your start date typically would be in June of 23 if we were looking at this fall. So hire both in the spring and fall. Typically, we like to do the hiring process in the fall. If we need additional candidates, we'll come back in the spring. And just over the last 2 days, we in Minneapolis had a handful of interviews to hire people to start in June. And last fall, we hired 2 individuals to start in June as well. And we also hired 2 people for internships that start in May of this year. And so there's a lot of opportunity for entry-level positions and also for internships at the OCC that if you're interested, certainly I'd invite you to investigate more and to, or you could even call myself or Marcella as well. So that's what I had for you. Marcy, would you like to share a little bit about your experience?
Sure, yeah. So I want to highlight some of the things that Jay talked about with the training too, right? So I think part of the reason why I've gotten to where I am is because the OCC does such a great job in training. I started out my first, I don't even remember if it was 6 or 8 months, was with the training team, like Jay said, and we were taken to banks. So it's on the job training. There's some classroom training as well, but I really knew nothing except that I knew how to balance a checkbook and how to write a check. I knew nothing about banking before I started with the OCC. So I learned a lot and took the UCE, passed the UCE, and then I was an analyst for the Associate Deputy Comptroller, which is what Jay's position is now, helping them review reports, helping them with scheduling of the team, etc. And while I was in that position is when I started taking classes for my MBA through Metro State. And so that the OCC doesn't pay for a degree, but they pay for relevant courses. And for the MBA course, every course that I took was relevant to the position. So in essence, they paid for my MBA, which is a great benefit and great experience. There are limits as to how much they will cover, et cetera, but I think it's just a great benefit to have, and it really helped me. Well, an MBA isn't one of the criteria that Jay mentioned for working at the OCC. I think the things that I learned definitely helped me progress in my career when I was able to look at things more holistically, think more strategically about how businesses operate, et cetera. And then the other thing that I really benefited from is that the OCC has great leadership programs as well. So I was in a program called Leader Track, in which there was a great focus on management leadership. And I was able to go on 3 different rotations through that program. And that program no longer exists, but there is a program now called Lead, in which it has the same focus, right? So people can really focus on getting that additional leadership training and getting to the next level of leadership within the OCC. So just really wanted to start out by highlighting that benefit of training. The OCC really does invest in their people. And Jay at the beginning talked about he's over 30 years experience. I have over 20 years of experience. That is not uncommon within the OCC. So many people stay for so long just because it's not a job that we get bored with, and it's always a job that we're continuing to learn and grow. And so I started in the Minneapolis field office and moved to Washington, D.C. I have family here in the area, and I worked in the policy space. So I was working with commercial credit risk in 2008, 2009 timeframe, when there were a lot of borrowers who were struggling to make their payments. And so I was involved in making and writing policy with the other agencies tied to troubled debt restructuring, a lot of different activities. That was very different than anything that I did in the examination side. Very, very interesting. In the Leader Track program, I got to do three 6-month rotations as a team lead in large bank supervision, as a director in operational risk policy, and then as an ADC in Boston, Massachusetts. So again, very, very diverse, a variety of different things that I got to see. Even in community bank examining, no day is ever the same, but within the OCC, there are so many other opportunities as well, not just bank examination, but policy, writing policy, interpreting policy, enforcing policy. So a lot of different opportunities, and I got to experience that both in the commercial credit side of policy and then in the operational risk side of policy as well. After the Leader Track program, I became the director of international banking supervision. So one of the aspects that Jay did not talk about, because there's not a lot of people at the OCC who do this, but just like a bank, when they start out, they can choose to be a national bank or a state bank. Very large global international banks, they can choose to have a branch in the United States rather than have additional capital in the US. They just have a branch, and they have the choice to be either supervised as a federal branch or as a state bank. As a state branch. So the OCC supervises federal branches as well. There are a little over 50 federal branches that the OCC supervises, and those are supervised out of New York City. So I got to go and lead the supervision of that group as well. And again, one of the perks was international travel. It's not a very large part of the OCC, but it's definitely a part that I enjoyed. I got to go to Switzerland and China and Australia as part of that role, just because we were dealing with supervisors and regulators in those countries as well, going to the home country of the bank that we were supervising their branch here in the United States. So very diverse, interesting experiences there as well. And then I moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where I was the examiner in charge of a large bank. And that bank was owned by a Spanish company. And so again, got to travel to Spain and the UK. And because they're supervised by the European Central Bank, I also got to go to Frankfurt. So again, it's not normal like that. That's not thing that everyone, I'm not guaranteeing that you'll get to go on these international trips if you join the OCC, but it definitely is a possibility, and it's a fun part of the job too. And then the pandemic hit and I wanted to be closer to family again. So I got a job with the OCC as an assistant deputy comptroller in mid-sized bank supervision. And I was there for a while, and now I am the EIC for a large bank here in Virginia. So again, a wide range of things that we can do within the OCC, a lot of variety. And I've loved every single day. I don't think that there's ever been a day that's been the same. So if you like to do the same thing over and over again, definitely, I'm not sure that the OCC is going to give you that. But if you like a lot of variety, a lot of changes, learning new things constantly, the investment that they provide to the examiners to continue to learn and grow too, I think I've enjoyed the career. And like I said, it's not uncommon for people like Jay and I to have 20, 30 years of experience, all staying with the OCC and continuing to do new and different things every day.
Thank you, Marcy. Emily, is there anybody in the chat box with questions?
Nothing that's been added to the chat, but I was curious if you could explain a little bit more about the application process, not the logistic part of kind of after the application's received, but the pre-part. So what would an applicant need to do in order to submit their application to the OCC?
Sure. So, and maybe Bill can speak to this a little bit as well, but I know as we interviewed or sent out notice for internship applicants this spring, we worked with the placement office at Metro State, and we worked with you via handshake, I believe, and so college students are, certainly that's a mode of communication that you can see job postings out there. And then, if you're interested in applying, then the jobs are actually posted on USA Jobs. And so you would use that engine to actually submit your application.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that, so what Jay talked about is the typical way people enter into the OCC from college, having no work experience, no prior work experience, but or limited to that 3-year work experience. But we also do hire experienced people who have already a variety of experience in banks themselves, right? Or with regard to information technology, risk, cybersecurity experience, et cetera. So we do hire experienced people as well. And as of today, actually, sorry, as of yesterday, we just posted a number of positions on USA Jobs as well. So USA Jobs is the place to go to see if there are any current jobs because I know Metro does also have degrees for people who already have work experience, right? So if any people who already have some experience and they're maybe just furthering their education, getting their master's, et cetera, but they are interested in the OCC, we do have positions open every once in a while for experienced hires as well. And in large bank supervision, we currently posted yesterday for positions with experience.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really looking for you to share that information about USA Jobs, just because it's a different job search process than your standard application if you're applying to work at one of the banks you all supervise, as an example.
Yeah, and I will point out the resume for the OCC is very different than what I was taught how to write a resume when I first started looking for jobs, right? Normally a resume is very short, gives to the point information, not more than a page or two potentially. At the OCC, when you're applying and creating your resume, you really do have to address in that resume all of the various aspects that the OCC is looking for that particular position. So if you've done that criteria, you need to include that in the resume. So as a result, the resume can get quite lengthy and will look different than a normal business resume.
But certainly nothing to be distracted by. I mean, the job application out process is very, very easy, and we would certainly welcome anybody that is interested in working for us to look for those postings next September. And certainly I can leave my number with Emily, and certainly if anybody would like to contact me or email me, I would certainly welcome that as well.
That's
Bill,
such
did
a
you
nice
have a-
offer, Jay. Thank you. You'd be a good networking connection for the students in the audience today.
Exactly. You know, and I would just share too that I mentioned earlier that we hired 2 internship applicants to start in May. And one of those is from Metro State. And so just over the past few months, I've been working with Bill and you know, working to develop our relationship and regrow our relationship as employers with your institute, your university. And so we were very happy to have an applicant from Metro State, and they were successful in obtaining the internship. So we definitely look forward to continuing our association with your university and hope to continue to attract applicants in both the entry level and internship programs going forward.
Ian, Jason, any questions from you two? You have a kind of a private audience today. The ratio is good, one-on-one.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I am a recent grad with a major in information technology. And then I heard who was it? Marcy mentioned something about information technology. So is there any like any available jobs for the OCC that involve with IT?
You know, there certainly are, and the IT area is, you know, just to step back and talk a little bit about, you know, the risk in that we see in the banking world. And so every quarter, you know, we do a risk assessment of all our banks in both the midsize and community bank line of business and also large bank line of business. And traditionally, credit risk would always be at the top of the list. And what's happened, even though credit risk is still a very key risk, certainly cybersecurity and IT, the IT function is now at the top of the list. And as we start to build out our teams moving forward, as part of everyone being a generalist, the knowledge and skill set of IT is going to continue to be more and more important. And so certainly there would be opportunities on the IT side. You know, my best advice would be for you to apply to be an assistant national bank examiner. And then you could specialize in IT. It's, you know, once you become commissioned, and I'll tell you what, you know, that area is just so wide open with opportunity for people that have a strong knowledge and skill set in IT, and you would be a very valuable piece to our business. So if you have an interest, you know, certainly look for those postings this fall for our assistant national bank examiner position.
Yeah, so Jay, I don't remember what page it was, but when the CAMELS ITCC page, IT information technology, yeah, page 7 is definitely something that we examine and supervise.
Any other questions around that? And certainly we would answer anything else that you have, you know, questions on. Certainly a very, very high risk right now in the banking industry, and we need skilled people to help examine that area.
Marcy, I'm curious if you would answer, and this will be kind of a convoluted question, but you shared that you didn't know anything about banking before you started this job. And so I'm curious how you even came to find the opportunity and what made you apply or what appealed to you.
Yeah, so how I learned about it was very unique also. So I worked in accounting at a CPA firm, and I wanted to get into audit, but I was in the tax department in employee benefits. One of the women that I worked with in tax, her husband was a bank examiner. So she said, hey, bank examining is a lot like auditing. If you want to get into auditing, here's an option for you. So yeah, very few people know what a bank examiner does or what we do. And it's a shame because it's such a great job. But yeah, I just fell into it because the wife of a bank examiner worked with me. And so that's how I learned about the OCC. But it is very similar to auditing in that we look at reports, we make sure that the bank has their own testing, we meet regularly with senior bank management, right? And again, what other job do you go into where your first few months on the job, you're dealing directly with the president of the bank, the senior risk officer of the bank, the CFO of the bank, you know, just different things that we have communication with these very high level individuals. And so we're learning on the job as we're dealing with these very knowledgeable, very experienced people. But the OCC has policies, procedures that we follow, right? So even though I didn't know a lot about bank examining, I was following the guidance that the OCC has so that I could properly evaluate the bank. But how I used to be in recruiting and how other people found out about the OCC is events like this, where we go and we tell college students about what we do. Otherwise, if we're getting experienced people, it's people who have worked in the banking industry, and so they know about who the OCC is. But yeah, it's a very unique job that not many people know about, and I'm very grateful that my coworker told me about this job opportunity.
And we're so grateful you could pass the information along to us, because there's no like CSI or ER show where we get to see the inside of a bank and in your different roles. So we appreciate that you can share with us what we don't know about.
And what's kind of interesting, so Marcy and I mean, we've spent the majority of our careers working for the OCC, which many others in our agency have. But there's others that, work for us, and maybe they eventually go to work in a bank, for example. And while I would like to keep every recruit working for us, what the OCC does is for people that work for us and go into banking, it helps them understand how the whole bank operates. We touch, like on this page, we touch all of these areas when we go in and do examinations. And if a person were to go and work in a bank, in the credit area or in the compliance area, those people certainly learn those areas very well, but oftentimes they don't see the big picture of the bank as well as maybe somebody that has worked at the OCC and later goes on to spend the rest of their career in a bank. And so I think that, the OCC is just a great way to get introduced to risk management within a financial institution in our national banks and thrifts, and, provides not only an excellent career path for a career to remain at the OCC, but if somebody wants to step out from the OCC, it prepares them for a very successful career in banking as well. And that's something that, people should realize as well. It's a great training ground to learn about banking.
Yeah, another thing too, that last one, Community Reinvestment Act, is another thing that we review. And so sometimes, people get motivated by all sorts of different reasons, right? Power, money, service. And so for those who are really motivated to make a difference, to ensure, right, our mission is to ensure the safety and soundness of banking, and just to play a real significant role, consumer compliance, making sure that banks have processes in place that consumers aren't taken advantage of, right? So those are all the worthy things that we do as well. Like, we really do play an important role of service to the economy, to consumers. So there's a variety of different things that we do. So depending on what motivates you, I think there's a lot of areas within the OCC that you can have that motivation met, whether it's being of service or whether it's like having the power again to influence the presidents of an institution. A variety of different things. I think the OCC covers all of those aspects.
Maybe I can just share a little bit about our current work environment during the pandemic. And, so when the pandemic hit, roughly 2 years ago, we went to a remote work environment where people work from their homes. And we're still in that maximum telework or extended telework environment. And we're actually going to reopen, if you will, during the first week in June. And in the community bank line of business, certainly we have institutions that are located throughout our footprints. So in Minneapolis's case, we supervise banks in pretty much throughout the whole state of Minnesota. I also have an office in Fargo where we supervise the 6 or 7 national banks and thrifts in the state of North Dakota. And then we supervise some banks in Western Wisconsin. And so about a year ago, we gave the staff the opportunity, if they were comfortable traveling to banks, that we would take smaller teams into our banks to do on-site work. And I think as we go forward, even though we're officially reopening again on June 6th, there's going to continue to be a good mix of on-site and off-site work. And we would call them more hybrid type examinations. And so our travel requirements are going to be reduced significantly. And as long with that remote work, there will continue to be opportunities to work at home. We need a nice mix of that as well. But I think if the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us that we have the capacity to do more remote work in our banks and institutions. And so that'll be more the mix going forward on the community bank line of business side, is the hybrid examinations, a mix of on-site and off-site work, and hopefully a good balance of work so we can still train staff, but then also provide better work-life scenarios for our employees as well.
Thank you for sharing, Jay. I'll just ask one more time if there are any other questions that we can ask our guest today.
So Emily, how about if I can leave my contact information with you? Would that be?
Yes, I was just going to ask if our attendees had thought of something after our time together, if there was a way they could reach out to you. And it sounds like you'd be happy if they contacted me and I could pass along
Exactly.
your contact information.
So I'll leave you my contact information, and I would encourage, as you think about what we talked today, if anything comes to mind, certainly reach out and we can answer whatever other questions you might have.
Thank you for that offer. And I will put my own email in the chat so our attendees can grab that. But I want to thank you both for joining us today. I personally learned a lot about the OCC, and we'll be happy to share this recording and just resources with our students. Knowing that USA Jobs has a more unique resume style, we are really excited to be able to offer the Department of Veterans Affairs is coming on Thursday at 3 p.m. of this week to speak to applying for federal employment. So if you want that extra set of help for applying for an opportunity like the OCC, please join us with that session. And I just added that link in the chat as well, so people can sign up and join us there too, and make sure you're putting your best foot forward for an application with the OCC.
The one last thing before we close, and
yeah,
I know right now the job market is very, I'm just going to use the word hot. There's a lot of opportunities in today's world, right? From an employment perspective. But, both Marcy and I have been working with the OCC and the federal government for a number of years. And, and I guess as we talked about the different benefits to working for the OCC, one of the things I've really enjoyed is just job stability. And for many of you that are on the call today, maybe you haven't been through a recession, or you've been very, you're much younger when that happened. And, and during recessionary periods, oftentimes people could lose jobs in the marketplace. But what's really unique about working for the OCC is even during a recession, our jobs actually become more important. And so we have job security at the OCC is very strong. And so I would just, if you're looking for a job where you can make a difference, and you're looking for a job where maybe public service is your calling, certainly the OCC offers a very stable job environment and could be the right fit for you. So give that some consideration as well.
I think that's a great addition, especially after we saw such huge job losses about this time 2 years ago. It's a really important reminder.
Well, we certainly
Hey.
thank everybody for the opportunity to meet with you virtually today and tell our story. And certainly would welcome any of you, if you have further questions, to contact me and in other ways share the story with others. We'd love to talk to you down the road.
Well, let's give our guests a round of virtual applause. Thank you, Jay and Marcy, for being here today. We really appreciate the time and that willingness to connect after our time together today as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.